This is Tom Price, the face of Our Towns, Our City Institute in the city of Greater Sudbury, Ontario. And we're taking this opportunity to inform whoever is watching of what our city has gotten taxpayers into over the last, believe it or not, 10 years. Over those 10 years, they've invested $41 million into the spending on an event center to add 1,400 extra seats. No estimate to back it up, and no cost references to what these event centers cost other jurisdictions. Just as a point of full disclosure, the costs and references are from City of Greater Sudbury documents, publicly available without breaching real or implied confidentiality, unless otherwise noted. We'll be reporting on 3 different reports throughout this presentation. One is a council meeting of February the 18th, 2025. The second is a Price Waterhouse report of February 21st, 2017. And the third is a Brisbane Brook Bainan report of April 16th, 2024. All 3 reports with council majority approval were used to allow funding totaling $225 million, not including interest, for an event center claimed to cost $200 million. We're not sure how they rationalized $225 million to $200 million, but that is what they seem to have done. In February 2025, the Manager of Development of Infrastructure, on slide 20 of a presentation of his, made the comments of the following. And they are looking as engagement next steps as those groups that you see before you and other community groups. So you have to ask yourself, well, which of any of those groups or so-called stakeholders actually have skin in the game, actually are putting money towards this facility? And the answer is shown in red, only the taxpayers of Greater Sudbury. The next slide in his presentation indicated that the schematic design, Class D estimate is the next stage, geotechnical investigation is next stage, complete term sheet negotiations with the Sudbury Wolves Sports and Entertainment Group, and issue a request for pre-qualification for a construction manager. The request for proposal for venue management services on the works as well. But we don't have any of those yet. How can we say it's a $200 million project? 10 years to reach the same point where this same council majority canceled in 2022 at $217 million for construction only in both cases. What has changed? Because of these oddities in these 2 slides, OTOCI has done some investigation and asked to be part of that other community groups that they will be meeting with and engaging with. So what did we ask? Well, in February of 2025, they had that meeting, and in the meeting, one of the councillors also accused social media users of lying about the event center costs. So on February 21st, we asked that councillor, what numbers are we lying about? We've had no response. As you can see, there's been several requests by us to be included in the engagement groups. We've had no response. 16.5 weeks to Friday the 13th of June of this year, no responses, and the accusing councillor has recently stated costs availability in September 2025. Well, if he's not going to get accurate costs till 2025, how does he know we were lying? Or if we were lying? Something doesn't sound right. So what did we do? We issued in our request to be represented that we addressed 7 different issues. The red titles here indicate the priority that we put on each of these issues, and the fact that we believe all of these issues are important to the success of the proposed event center. How can you ignore market area or gross domestic product, benchmarking, transit, transportation, climate change, and costs? Since there's been no response, however, we sought professional help in understanding why there's no response from this group. We consulted a psychologist from out of town to ensure no bias. In our discussions with him, he identified these excuses for not responding. But these are excuses that will be used. These are not the reason for non-response. In that case, clinically speaking, he stated no response is a response. It is the responder's lack of required technical and/or social skills. Wow. So, we take another look at these key issues. Well, the market area that they've defined is so bizarre that it defies common sense. Gross domestic product that they've supplied doesn't make sense. Benchmarking, there was none. Transit, well, our transit system covers less than 35% of the city, less than 32% of the metropolitan area, and only 0.33% of the market area that they defined. Transportation, if anybody's been on the roads in Sudbury, you know the utter torment that you go through driving to get to the event center. Climate change, they talked about emissions from the operating event center. But what about all the emissions from building the place? That's not addressed at all. Cost, as of February the 18th, as you saw earlier in the former manager's slide, there is no Class D estimate yet. So we only have conceptual costs, 650% of the initial proposal. And that does not include interest of $164 million and greenhouse gas emissions social costs of $135 million. What credible response could possibly justify these actions? So let's go to these one by one. First of all, the market area. Well, taking a look at Ontario, the market area for Greater Sudbury that was defined, first of all, in 2017 by Pricewaterhouse and endorsed in 2024 by Brisbane Brook Bainin Architects, as what you see outlined in the red dotted line on the map. That area, they claim, contains 550 population, which is our market. Well, if you focus down, and I will just enlarge it so everyone can see, that area includes 378,000 square kilometers. Less than 75%, or greater than 75%, has no roads. 35% of Ontario is enclosed in that area. 550,000 population with a 1.46 population density. Okay. Now, you can see that this is largely a vacant area. There is the odd indigenous communities within that area. They're very small. In fact, one of these, the Pewanik one up here on the left, only has about 200 population. The largest one of these only has 5,000. So basically, they're relying on this. But key to this whole market area, we've been told multiple times that if we build this event center, tourism will come. Well, there's no indication on any of these reports that there will be any tourism potential from south of Greater Sudbury. And that's not surprising. If you take a look at the population of those areas, below Sudbury, these areas here can have a tremendous, oh, that isn't working for some reason. Okay. But if you look at the population south of Sudbury, it baffles us on how we get to this point. So let's go then to the next slide, which is gross domestic product. This gross domestic product was contained in the 2024 presentation by the CAO of the city, Ed Archer, and recommended by the same person. Well, that's fine. I guess Mr. Archer's no longer with us. We have a new CAO, but his legacy lives on. These calculations that you see here are not relevant to the GDP. These are based, both of them are based on doing the GDP using all of the capital spending in 1 year. That's not how the GDP works. The GDP is based on what are you investing per year, and what are your products that you're going to market for that investment. This does not do that. It's a false thing. Further to that, though, there's been considerable stuff in the February the 18th, I guess it was, meeting, that parking has never been a part of the proposal for the event center. Well, in April of 2024, it was. They talked about it. The estimates assume new event center, 200 million, hotel convention center, 30 million, and parking structure complete with commercial stores, 35 million, for a total investment of 265 million. That was the basis of the second part of the GDP calculations. They are not relevant to the GDP of the event center. Well, let's move on to benchmarking. Benchmarking is a technique used by many companies to compare what they're planning to do to successful ones in other jurisdictions. It's quite a complicated process. You have to contain or take a look at all these factors in doing that. So what happened with Sudbury's benchmarking? Well, again, the PricewaterhouseCoopers one in 2017, backed up by the Brisbane Brook Mainon one in 2024, referenced 11 projects by Pricewaterhouse and 22 by the Brisbane Brook. However, none of those 33 referenced projects contained any post-audits of the projects, contained any GDP calculations, or contained any benchmarks. So, you now then have to ask, well, just what on earth did our councils pay for, if not for these essentials to decision making? They didn't do their job. If you go back to the psychologists, maybe they don't have the ability, either technically or socially, to be able to answer on these, because they're not responding. So let's go forward to the Greater Sudbury Transit System. Greater Sudbury Transit System is as seen in the map here. This is the city map, and if you take a look at, first of all, 75% of the market area has no roads. And full disclosure, we calculated that. The transit area is only 1,290 square kilometers. Greater Sudbury is 3,600. So that transit only covers 35 or 36% of the Greater Sudbury area. It only covers 30.1% or 8% of the metropolitan area. Of the market area, it only covers 0.33% of that whole market area. So there's no public transit for those areas you saw outside of this city. That tells you where we're at on transit. However, in 2017, OTOCI presented a plan to the city to use light rail to White River, to Sault Ste. Marie, down to Parry Sound towards Toronto, going to North Bay, going to Cape Riel and north, to pick up all of these communities that you see here. We've never received a response to this. Greater Sudbury has been a rail hub for 135 years. What the city is planning for transit right now is, as you see here, is buses and bicycles, and converting those buses to battery buses. That's what they're basing the transit system to be for the event center. Okay, that's part of the event center attendance. What about the others that have to drive? That's transportation. Well, this is our transportation. These are the roads in Greater Sudbury. The guy that made the presentation we talked about earlier, has told us that all these potholes that you see in this slide are due to freeze-thaw cycles. It's very obvious from this one, where you can see the car track or the wheel track through here, that this was filled with asphalt when the car hit it, or vehicle, maybe it was a truck, that compressed the water under that asphalt they put in, putting that water under 250 pounds pressure. That blew out the asphalt, and you can see where it's done it probably a number of times along here. He's no longer with us. Oh, I'm sorry, he is. I believe he's in charge of the event center now. This is typical of our roads. Now, obviously, that's what should not be. What should be is, as the city did a pilot test on in 2023, this is 2 years old. That little dark spot is a shadow of a light standard. It's in perfect shape after two winters. This is the old piece that he covered over with this resurfacing. He can do this at 70% cost savings per kilometer, or however you want to measure it. This is the same road that he did the test on further out. Why are we not taking that into account? Well, the infrastructure of the top portion here was deferred. This is 4 seasons. This is a 4 seasons condition. Every time it rains, we get potholes popping out. Further, in the April 18th or 16th presentation by the city, they said that we could take further deferrals to suit an event center funding. Well, that was a special levy for roads. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's go to climate change. Council majority approved of $1 billion to be spent by 2050 to reach net zero emissions. But they also approved more than $400 million to be spent by 2028, emitting more than 500,000 tons of greenhouse gas. That emission comes from the mining of materials that we need to build it, trucking those to a processing plant where they make, for example, if they mine the iron ore, they have to take this to a processing plant to convert the iron ore into steel. That steel gets trucked to the construction site, and the emissions from the construction site go into the building. That 550,000, though, does not include emissions from the demolition and disposal of the existing arena, which is included in their estimate. What does this mean? Well, it's a pretty grim situation. In 2022, I'll just enlarge that so you can read it better, Princeton University established a social cost of CO2 emitted at $185 per ton US. Today, that is $231 per ton Canadian, or equivalent to $116 million. social cost. At the same time, the Government of Canada in 2023 did the same thing independent of Princeton and established a social cost of emitted carbon dioxide at $271 per ton. For that 550,000 tons, that comes to 135.5 million. Social cost is the impact that we have from high carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Surely, if we're emitting that much more carbon dioxide, we are costing the public that 135 million. Not according to our city. They didn't take any of that into account. So let's go to the next stage. Well, what should be? Well, instead of building an event center, why don't we take a look at cleaning up our environmental hub contamination? Sudbury's been an environmental hub for 100 years. We have 5 environments. The one causing all the problem is societal. We could be collecting all of that waste if we had a science center that we could figure out how to separate the values from that and mine them. Take those and put them in manufacturing facilities. We could make money. We then finalize with the Event Center. It has grown 649% from its original proposal. 60 million was the original proposal. It now sits at 389 million. And that is a horrendous amount of growth. However, there is I suppose, a benefit to that in that the highest event center growth that we could find in any of the reviews that have been done was an event center in Perth, Australia, where their costs compared to original was 300%. So we're setting a new world standard here. As well, the funding status that we talked about is at the bottom. We've already borrowed by bullet debenture, $90 million. And we've approved, our council has approved another 135 million for a total borrowed amount of 225 million. Interest on those 2 loans comes to 164 million. So the total approved spending on those loans adds up to the 389 million. But they don't include that in the 200 million they talk about. We've already repaid 37 million of that debenture loan, and we've spent 43 million. But we still don't have an estimate. We don't have the social cost included in those numbers. We don't have a number of off-site costs included in those numbers. But they don't want to talk to us about that. Maybe because they don't have the technical or social skills to talk to us about it. So, where are we at? Well, of those concerned areas that we identified earlier, there are no credible responses that they can explain decisions from. And they've made decisions using bogus technical and financial socioeconomics. All of these courtesy of our current council majority. And you may say, well, no, that goes back to 2017. The council majority was the same in those years. We've re-elected those councillors. So why no responses? Well, as the psychologist said, is a lack of technical skill or social skills? I don't know what else it could be. So, our organization looks back in order to learn from the past what we've been doing wrong, in order to do right in protecting those 5 environments. Our societal environment has been derelict in duty. The majority is only right if the majority does right. However, the Sudbury South District that they're talking about for the event center, this is what is planned with taxpayer money. However, why could it not be what is shown on the bottom right with private investment? Like, Why would we spend $500 or more million on that event center when we have one sitting just across the street in here, already functioning as an event center arena with 4,700 seats? All we get here is an added 1,400 seats. That's it. Oh, and bright lights. So why would they go for this and not even consider this? Well, is that because of what we've talked about all through here? That they don't have the technical or financial capability? This slide is a poem by John Donne in 1624, and he quotes that there's no man as an island. He also quotes, "Ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." So, number of critics in Sudbury claim that the OTOCI is just 3 or 4 old men upset with the city. Well, these are the professions that have had input to this presentation. They are members of our organization of OTOCI, and those are the work areas where they practice their trades. I think that's a pretty large group of qualified individuals, and someone, when they saw this, commented that you probably have 10 times the amount of technical input to your presentation than the city has to their project. I can't validate that because I don't know, but who does the bell toll for? If we leave this alone, it can toll for thee, the taxpayer. If we don't leave it alone and correct the situation, it can toll for the councillors who's been making bad decisions for us. I'd like to thank everyone for your patience and time. That ends our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.